So yesterday, Call of Duty revealed some proper footage of Verdansk, showing off many of the graphical upgrades the map is getting compared to the original from 2020. The video shows off a lot of different locations across the map, talking about the new graphical features they've implemented. But from having watched it a few times through now, it seems that in terms of layout, in terms of cover, different POIs and locations, it's pretty much identical to the original. So what we're getting on April 3rd seems to be a more polished version of the original map, using 2024 and 2025 graphical upgrades to make it look as nice as possible, basically. We're going to cover off all the details in this video today, along with several now confirmed leaks, and we're only a week or so away from the launch of Verdansk again. So if you're excited, drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already, so you don't miss out on my Verdansk coverage that's coming very, very soon. The main graphical differences that you're going to see between this version of Verdansk and the original have all been done by the teams at Beenox, High Moon and Raven. Apparently, it's a complete rebuild from the ground up. So we've got updated textures, improved details, an updated lighting model. And while this has all been rebuilt, the developers have strived to keep the map as close to the original 2020 version as they possibly can to really give you that nostalgic feeling. So there's some new longer grasses in those less urbanized areas, like muddy puddles with reflections and new rocks and stuff, to sort of give it a little bit more of a realistic feeling. The brand new skybox they've added has been paired with better reflections in water, light bounces off different surfaces in more realistic ways, and the team has worked to improve the transition of lighting from interior to exterior. I think that's really, really important. Something that you might remember from the original Verdansk was how you could barely see inside buildings when you were standing outside of them, and vice versa. Sometimes you'd look out of the building and it looked really bright outside and you couldn't see people properly. And that would give other players massive advantages standing in those darkened or lightened areas, especially when it was paired with certain operator skins. So here's hoping that that won't be a major issue this time around. Hopefully the claims being made in this video do actually end up holding up. Shadows themselves will be more detailed because of the improved lighting quality, giving a bit more credence to actually using real shadows compared to just the lighter areas. And it also means that areas that are supposed to be a little bit darker will actually remain that way. One example in the video the developers used was the prison POI. They wanted it to remain as this darker, more gloomy location, but with the improved lighting, they've been able to balance that vibe with better overall visibility. Apparently, the materials used within the engine have been reworked so they react better with the lighting that is placed in different locations. So that means more natural brightness where you expect it, but also darker parts of the map that will remain darker. One point that was really stressed in the video was how, despite all the efforts put into improving the quality of Verdansk and really taking it up a notch, care was taken by each of the different teams to make sure the original design of Verdansk, made by Infinity Ward, was maintained, which is why despite all of the visual upgrades you're seeing in front of you, when you look at some of the wider shots and the different POIs, you largely see the same color palette, the same visual identity that you remember from Verdansk 2020. Personally, with all the information coming out about the relaunch of Verdansk, I think this is the best move they could have made. OG weapons coming back, OG vehicle controls, more military-inspired operator skins, and more. Everything is moving towards being an original experience, and that goes for the same here in Verdansk. Now, across the entire video, I was still looking for signs that developers had slipped up in some way, and stuff was where it shouldn't be, or they changed something that wasn't exactly the way it was from the original Verdansk. So apart from those obvious visual upgrades like the tall grasses, the muddy puddles that I've already mentioned, I don't think I could actually spot anything that looked out of place. The stadium POI looks to be completely closed off at the moment, as it was when Verdansk first launched, but it did open up in a later season to reveal a brand new play space, so I'm guessing we'll get that in the future. And the same goes for the train station as well. That looks closed off at the moment, but will probably be opened up. There were no additional zip lines that I could see on the sides of buildings, at least the ones that they showed off in this little trailer. It didn't appear that there were any new routes around certain areas, and there were no redeploy balloon locations or anything like that. And it wasn't that long ago that we heard from leakers that work was being done to massively improve the usability and the handling of vehicles for the Verdansk relaunch. And so not seeing any of those redeploy balloons across the map, at least in these shots anyway, gives me hope that that element of Warzone gameplay that has crept in over the years has been reverted, so fingers crossed. Now, outside of that footage, we did get a couple of confirmed elements returning to Verdansk via the Call of Duty social media accounts over the weekend. We are getting floating loot and a vertically sorted buy station. These are features that were upgraded, in air quotes, when we moved from Caldera to Warzone 2.0 and the introduction of Al Mazrah. The floating loot was deemed not realistic, and so Infinity Ward made all of the items physical so they could interact with other items around them, and then all the loot would just sit on the floor. And the buy station was supposedly changed to make it more readable and to help add more menus with different folders. Both of these changes were widely disliked by the community, but since there hasn't been a large-scale overhaul of the Warzone engine for some time, the features were just carried over from Al Mazrah into Urzikstan and all other versions of Warzone since they were added. But finally, they're being reverted. These are revisions that I'm happy to see, but I'm also sitting here scratching my head, wondering why the hell the features were ever removed in the first place. They both worked perfectly fine, so was it just change for the sake of change? One other addition that you might notice here on the buy station menu, a new redeploy all button has been added, something that could massively impact how players interact with the buy stations. If you've got all the cash you need to buy your players back, instead of having to tap repeatedly on their names to get them to respawn, leaving you stationary on the buy station for far too long, you'll now be able to just hit one button and buy everyone back available, or I'm assuming just use all of the cash that you currently have to buy back as many players as you are able to afford. That's a nice, neat addition that we're going to get to use very soon. Now, I wanted to take a moment in this video to discuss the launch of Verdansk and what it could mean for Warzone moving forwards, because as I'm sure you know, I do like Warzone. I loved Warzone back in 2020 and 2021, although since then I've probably enjoyed playing it less and less over time. There's been several ups, several downs throughout the life cycle, but if I can pinpoint when that downward spiral actually started, I think it began at the end of Modern Warfare 2019's life cycle, the end of what was supposed to be support for Warzone as a product. Call of Duty is an annualized franchise, and I think back in 2020, Activision was set to move on from Warzone and launch the next COD, and maybe the next Battle Royale version, maybe Blackout 2, because it was a Treyarch game that came after MW19, and they'd already had Black Ops 4 and Blackout the year before Warzone came along. But I think Activision saw the massive popularity of Warzone in late 2020, and they realized that they couldn't leave it behind, and they just greenlit extended support without really knowing what that extended support was going to be and what direction they should really go in. What resulted was a reskin of Verdansk in 2021 called Verdansk 84, which I actually really enjoyed playing, absolutely loved Iron Trials during those days. Then we had the destruction of Verdansk and the move to Caldera. Terrible move. The end of support for the original Warzone and the move to Warzone 2.0. Terrible move. And then the jump to Urzikstan, which can then itself claim extended support because we didn't get a new map after Modern Warfare 3, and instead we've been playing Urzikstan 2.0 for the last 5 months. It's like Activision and the teams in charge never really had a North Star for their extended development, and they just pivoted and changed directions as and when they had to, which resulted in Warzone itself never really sticking to the core identity that was set with Verdansk. And I think that's why Warzone now is very, very different from what it was when it first launched. Of course, people know how to play Warzone now. They know the ins and outs of it, and people are playing it at a much higher level than when we all first started back in March 2020. So that is always going to feel a bit different. But there are so many gameplay elements involved with Warzone now that just weren't available back in 2020. But it does now finally seem that after 5 years, we might be getting back just some of that core Warzone experience. Does that guarantee success? No, of course it doesn't. There are still glaring issues with Warzone as a product, and I think it's how the developers, Activision, Call of Duty, handle these things moving forward that will have a strong bearing on how players perceive this massive update and the experience. First of all, we got to mention the cheaters. My god, I don't think we've ever had an extended period of Warzone support where cheaters haven't been a major concern. The Ricochet anti-cheat, is largely considered to be a joke by most players. I certainly have no confidence in it whatsoever, and it doesn't appear to be able to stand up and hold back the tidal wave of companies and people developing programs and scripts that can infiltrate into the game. Supposedly, there are more new detections coming with Season 3, but purely based on my experience since Ricochet was first added to Warzone, I think nearly 4 years ago, I'm really not holding out that much hope. The server performance is another concern, although I will say the developers have improved on this over time. The situation isn't as bad as what it used to be, but I still think there's a huge amount of work to do to restore confidence that players have lost. We still get desync, we still get ghost bullets, we still get super bullets, we still get disconnects, and if that happens, you know, once in every 25 or 30 games, I think people can get past it. But for me, it's still happening regularly enough for me to consider them as issues that do need to be resolved. And let's just go back to it. The identity of the game that I spoke about earlier, that is a concern for me. Warzone isn't the more grounded, military-inspired battle royale that it was in 2020. It's now a unicorn vomit simulator with hundreds of garish skins that largely have contributed to a complete loss in visual identity. It's now rumoured there's going to be some sort of toggle in the settings with Verdansk where you're going to be able to turn off the custom skins and see them replaced with default options. If that's true, I will celebrate off the top of the highest hill on Verdansk, or just jump off of dam and pancake into the frozen lake below. I 1000% want to see that happen. Not only so that the game has the original identity to give us that nostalgic Verdansk feeling, but also just to help with simple visibility. There are several skins in the game right now, the Terminator skin being one of them, that are so hard to see compared to others that they're basically an unfair paid advantage for players using them. I really hope that toggle is real and it gets added with Season 3. Even with this visual upgrade for Verdansk, I don't think the game is going to be the same as it once was. It's still a single moment in time that cannot be replicated. There were other external factors that contributed to the meteoric rise of Warzone. However, the changes that are being made, the ones that we know about, the ones that have been confirmed, and still the rumoured ones, which we expect to happen, they do feel as though the developers have listened to what players have been asking for close to 5 years now, and they've tried to implement changes that will bring back an experience close to what was offered back in 2020. Warzone used to be a great open map for you to explore with your friends, fight with other teams, use different weapons, drive around in vehicles, gadgets, explosives, whatever, and win battle royale matches. But since then, the game has made so many mistakes and taken so many wrong turns, it's almost unrecognizable. Whether we get something close to 2020 Verdansk remains to be seen. I just hope we do. Thanks for watching, guys. Leave me your comments down below, and I'll catch you in the next one.